Hello and welcome to our Mesh Wireless Solution webinar. So let's meet the team. My name is Łukasz, I'm the product specialist, and our today's presenter, Fergal, is our top technical support specialist. Hello, Fergal.
Hi, how's it going? Welcome to the webinar, everyone. So the agenda today. So this webinar is beneficial for installers and home users, and some salespeople might be interested as well. So understanding mesh networks. So how do they work? The benefits of using mesh, the advantages and disadvantages compared to maybe a traditional wireless network. Mesh compatibility. So there are certain devices that will only mesh together. So I will show you that later on. Use cases. So different places that it might work best. And then installation and configuration. So I'll go over some mesh configurations later on and a Q&A near the end. So what is mesh? Mesh is a wireless network solution which consists of multiple points or nodes that work together to extend your Wi-Fi network. This will extend Wi-Fi coverage for large areas and hard to reach areas. It is fast and reliable, and it has a self-healing technology. So let's say an AP disconnects, the other APs in the mesh will adapt. It also has enhanced connectivity. Mesh networks are also especially useful in environments where wired infrastructure isn't available. So how does it work? So in this diagram you can see here, there is a mesh route. So there's always one mesh route. You decide at the start of creating your mesh network what the mesh route device will be. The mesh route will control the other APs, and any configurations that you make on the route will be inherited by the nodes. And as you can see here, these are all the different nodes that are connected. So yeah, there's this is called a wireless uplink or a hop. And there is a max of 3 hops. So there's 2 scenarios for devices that you can use for the mesh route. So you can have, just imagine this is a router here, a Wi-Fi router. So it can have 7 nodes connected to it. The next scenario would be to have a non-Wi-Fi router. That is an LTE router there. And that can be, you can have an access point connected to that through Ethernet cable. So it has internet access, and then again, it can have 7 nodes. So in a mesh network, there can be a total of 8 devices, including the mesh route. So DrayTek Mesh is modular. You can add or take away nodes as needed. You can also move them around if you need to as well, once they're connected to the mesh network. So in this diagram here again, you can see the wireless uplinks with the hops. And here's a wired one here. Now, the reason why you might want to have a wired connection here is because with the hops, there is extra latency. So you will lose performance. So it is best to have 1 to 2 hops, maybe 3 hops. If you don't have the wired infrastructure, then 3 hops is still fine, but you will lose some performance. DrayTek Mesh self-organizes links between each node to ensure the best possible speeds. Mesh nodes further away will connect wirelessly to the nearest mesh node. Also, when a new mesh node is adopted by the mesh route, it will automatically get added to the mesh network. So with our newer models of AP, like the 962C and the 1062C, they will decide automatically whether to be the mesh node or access point. And also there is the wired uplink. They'll automatically detect if they're wired or not. And then if they're wireless, they will wait to be added to the mesh network. So the benefits of using mesh. The first one is improved connectivity. So it ensures a strong, consistent Wi-Fi, and this can be used in large buildings or complex environments. And it also reduces signal drops, and this can enhance the user experience. Flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, it's modular by design. So this can be ideal for environments that require adaptable and expandable networks. Also enhancing network coverage. So DrayTek Mesh can eliminate dead zones, and this can provide stable Wi-Fi coverage across large areas. And finally, as I mentioned before, the self-healing, auto-optimizing. So the mesh network will automatically adjust connections between APs to maintain optimal performance. And this, even if the network changes, it will adapt as well. Also, if an AP fails for whatever reason, the network will reroute traffic through the other APs. So advantages and disadvantages, I just wanted to go through this. So compared to a traditional wireless network where you'd use central AP management. So the advantage is easy configuration. So you can just set up the root mesh, and then all of the other APs will get synced over the config to them. So it's easy to set up, and that will save you time. It's modular, as I mentioned before. So this will add flexibility. There's no need for extra wires or equipment like switches, so it can be a cost-effective solution. Disadvantages, so like I mentioned before, it has limited nodes, max 8. This is including the root device. So the central AP management, you can have up to 20 or 50 depending on the device. Performance, as I mentioned before, with the hops, when you get up to 3, you lose performance. Also, if it's fully wireless network, a lot depends on environment. So if you had thick walls, maybe a lot of glass, that kind of thing, the performance wouldn't be as good. And then compatibility. So yeah, there are certain devices that will only mesh together. So yeah, we'll go through that in a bit. And the hops as well, like I mentioned earlier, there's max 3 hops. And that's one of the newer DrayTek APs there, which is 962C. So this is a nice chart here. It's a wireless solution comparison. I'll talk mainly about the AP-based management and the router-based management. So that's central AP management that you can do from within the AP access points or routers. And as you can see here, the mesh has a lot of features that these other guys do too. So like I mentioned, number of managed APs can be 50 or 20 depending on the devices. Whereas the mesh is max 7 or 8, including the mesh route. So for these AP-based ones, they're wired. Router-based, it's wired as well. The mesh can have a mix of wireless and wired. The latency is low because these guys are wired here. And like I mentioned, it increases with each hop with the mesh. So the mesh is the only one here that has that self-healing uplink because it's all wireless and it has that technology in it too. If an AP drops, the other ones adapt. So compatibility is medium for the APs, depending on the devices. For the router, it's full when they're wired together. And then, yeah, it's very limited with the mesh, or it can be limited with the mesh. So also there's a configuration sync on the mesh that's very handy, but you can also do this with AP central management. There's roaming that works out of the box. Once you connect up your mesh, it will work. Whereas you kind of have to configure it with these guys here, with the AP-based management and the router-based management. So yeah, there's some monitoring here for the actual APs, and then the mesh has it for the clients. There's one last thing I just want to touch on is AP maintenance. So you can send from a router, you can send the firmware to all the APs, whereas the mesh you would have to do it manually. So you have to go into each mesh and upgrade the firmware manually. Okay, just moving on. So there is the wireless app. This is designed for the DrayTek wireless solutions. So we'll just run through that. So you can build wireless mesh network from scratch easily without connecting cables to access points. You can monitor the wireless network. It has data-rich pages like channel load and client usage for monitoring your network effortlessly. And then they have parental client control, so you can schedule internet pause time for your children or other Wi-Fi clients. So moving on to mesh compatibility. So it is important to make sure that before you purchase any of the devices, to make sure they can mesh together properly. So yeah, I just wanted to show you where to find it on the DrayTek website here. So you go to products, access points, mesh compatibility. So you'll see the charts here. So I'm going to just run through that. So this is the router as the mesh route. So as you can see here, we have the AX model routers and the AC model routers. The AX model routers will mesh with the 906, the 962, and the 1062. These are the newer APs in the list. And then the AC will mesh with the rest of them, the likes of the 903, the 918, or that's the outdoor AP, and the 1060C. So the main difference really here with AC and AX is the technology. So AC is Wi-Fi 5, AX is Wi-Fi 6. Now these guys here, 1060C, 1000C are Wi-Fi 6 as well. But it's just the difference between the newer APs and the older models is that, for mesh anyway, is the chipset. There's a different chipset in them, so that's why they have the different compatibility. So it is much the same with the APs. The ones that mesh with the AC models will mesh with each other when the AP is the mesh route, and likewise with the 906, 962, and the 1062. Well, actually, the 906 is by itself there, so it will only mesh with itself when it's a route. And this is just because there is a different operating system on these newer models here, the 962 and the 1062. So I just wanted to run through different use cases, places that I think could benefit from a mesh network with a suggested setup. Of course, they are just suggestions. We always recommend before you set up a mesh to do a site survey. So SMBs, small to medium-sized businesses. So you can imagine like an office space, a multiple floor environment. You could have laptops and mobile devices moving around. So they want seamless connection through roaming. So a suggested setup for that, maybe a Viger 2962. That's one of the enterprise models. It doesn't have Wi-Fi. So then you could have 4 AP 1062Cs. One of these could be the mesh route. And then you could have 4 AP 962s, let's say, as well. Now, being in office, I would imagine they would have some wired infrastructure already, so you could have a mix of wireless and wired uplinks to have good performance throughout the office. A large home. So again, it can have multiple floors, maybe not as much as an office, but you could have 2 floors and maybe an attic room that needs Wi-Fi for an office or something. So a suggested setup would be maybe a 2927AX. This router is suitable for fiber to the premises connections. It has Wi-Fi 6, and then depending on the size of your house, you could have 2 to 4 AP962s. And for easy configuration and setup, fully wireless would probably suit compared to having like switches and extra wires and stuff. Educational institutions, so think like schools, colleges, maybe universities could benefit. There could be multiple floors again, different classrooms, offices for admin and principal, that kind of thing, that need Wi-Fi coverage. So suggested setup. Again, the 2927 would probably suit if they had fiber to the premises connection. But if they didn't and they had a fiber to the cabinet VDSL connection, let's say, you could go for the 2865, which has an inbuilt modem in it. And again, depending on the size of the building, maybe 2 962s or 2 1062Cs. This could be a mix of wired, depending on what the infrastructure is there already. But fully wireless might be handy just for setup. And this is the last example here. So public venue, think maybe like a pub that has an outdoor area. For this one, I decided to suggest a setup of a 2927 AC or 2865 AC. I went for AC as the 918 or here is an outdoor one, which meshes with these the AC models. So depending on the size, you could have 2 1060Cs or 2 960Cs. So you could have the full 5 for full coverage of the inside and outside of your pub. So this is installation and configuration part. So here I'll be doing a demo on setting up a mesh network with a 2865AX as the root mesh and 2 962Cs as nodes. So the first part is just on your root mesh, you need to set up your wireless LAN. Probably everyone watching knows how to do this part, but I'll just run through it quickly. And I'm making a guest network later on to just show you how to do VLAN tags on the newer routers, or the newer access points. It's a little bit different than the older models. So that's for 2.4. I do the same for 5 as well. So keep them all in the same. So moving on to mesh. So mesh setup, you go there, enable the mesh. It's pretty straightforward. You enter group admin password. This is how you'll access the APs if you need to, maybe upgrade firmware or something. Click OK. Then you just need to search for the access point. There was one thing I meant to do for doing was bridge VLAN to mesh, but just want to point that out. That's for doing the guest network. So it's on a different subnet, LAN 2. So you select them, give them a name. I call this office. Next one is reception. Click apply. I'll skip this on. So once that completes, they'll be there. So the config needs to sync. So we go to status, mesh status, just to make sure they are connected properly. So as you can see, Office is online, waiting to sync up. Reception isn't online just yet. I'll just skip this on a little bit. And as you can see, Office is fully synced now, and that's the configuration sent over. So a lot of you might know this part already, but this is just setting up the VLANs. So you'll have LAN 1 and 2. So SSID 1 will be on LAN 1, SSID 2 will be on LAN 2 for the guest network, and you put a VLAN tag. I'm going to put in 20. Just do reboot. So we go on to the 962C AP. So this is a bit different interface, as you can see, than the other models. And you need to add in, kind of like a switch, you need to add in the VLAN tag like this and give it a name. Let's call this one guest. Save that. And then you go to wireless LAN. And this is already configured from the mesh route. And then you put the VLAN tag in there, apply. And that's it. It just processes and that's it added in. So this is just a 2927 LAC, and I'm setting up AP as a mesh node to 960C. I just want to show you with the older models how it's set up as well. And I'm just getting an IP through DHCP from the router. There we are. So we got 1.11. So I just copy that, paste it in the search bar so I can access the AP. Just log in with admin because it's just from factory default. So with the 962, it does this automatically. It's automatically in mesh node. So, but you have to log into the 960C and the older models to actually tell it that to be a mesh node before you can add it to the mesh. So that's it there. Please use mesh route to add. And this is just to show you the VLAN tag. So on the older models, you can just actually type it in there. And that's it. Click OK. Easy. So I just wanted to just point out some troubleshooting tips. Well, just a couple. It's mainly just sometimes APs, they don't want to get added. The nodes just don't want to they don't want to sync up for whatever reason. So it is always good practice to have all the devices on the latest firmware. So make sure your mesh route is on the latest firmware and all the nodes. And the next step really is just to delete and rebuild. So if you delete the node from the mesh route altogether, just so it forgets it, and then just do a factory reset of that AP, then you can just, it doesn't matter if you do a factory reset, you can always, it will always get the configurations from the mesh route again when it gets added back into the mesh. But yeah, sometimes it just stays on amber and it never configs. So that would be the main reasons. It's just that you wouldn't be on the latest firmware, and sometimes you just have to reset everything. You don't need to reset the mesh route or anything, just the node itself. But yeah, that should help. Okay, and just a quick recap. So we covered understanding mesh networks, how they work, the benefits of using a mesh network, the advantages and disadvantages compared to, let's say, a traditional wireless network. The mesh compatibility, I've shown you different devices that will work best with mesh, or will only really work with mesh together, and use cases, so certain places that it might work well, and suggested setups and installation and configuration. So now we've moved on to our Q&A section, and I see we've received a lot of questions, which is great. I'll now hand things over to Lukasz, who will help me read and answer your questions.
Thank you, Fergal. That was a great presentation. We've got some questions, some very interesting questions from you guys. let's start from the first one. How does DrayTek Mesh compare to traditional extenders?
Okay, so traditional extenders usually they break up the network. They have their own kind of SSID in a way, whereas Mesh, the DrayTek Mesh will have it'll be all one network and they all work together. So like roaming doesn't really work with traditional extenders the way it would with DrayTek APs or Mesh, should I say. The other thing is it's very easy to configure compared to traditional extenders. So you can just you can sync across the configs to all the nodes. Easy. Yeah.
I would just add that DrayTek Mesh system basically is designed to manage multiple access points. So traditional extender is probably considered as a single device or maybe two devices, one in the maybe garage and another one upstairs or something for like home users. So that probably can still work. However, management and syncing configuration between them would have to be done manually, whereas mesh system can do it for you automatically. The second question I've got here is how does the mesh network handle interference and signal dropouts?
That's a good question. Yeah, so signal dropouts, because it has that self-healing technology in it, where the other APs will reroute the traffic to closer ones when an access point drops out. That helps to deal with the signal drops. The interference would be the main thing would be kind of before you put in a mesh network, like I was mentioning earlier, is to do a site survey just to make sure you're not placing the APs near place where there will be interference, like microwaves, elevators, places like that. So yeah, and just make sure it's not close to neighboring Wi-Fi networks. But yeah.
That's great. Another question we got here is, can the mesh network handle high traffic or multiple devices?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it depends really on the access point, the device, the specs of the device that you're using, the access points. But yeah, it can handle high traffic, multiple devices, no problem. It really just depends on the specs of the device, though, of the access point.
There's yet another question about the firmware. So how does the system handle firmware updates across all nodes?
So this, I suppose it could be kind of a disadvantage in a way compared to the central AP management. You can actually, from a router anyway, you can send across you can upgrade the firmware maintenance from the actual router. Whereas with the mesh, you have to go in manually and upgrade the firmware that way. You can see it here, AP management, maintenance, sorry, excuse me.
Okay. So basically, we can see that some central management platforms supports firmware updates and stuff. So under the AP maintenance section down the bottom, we can see firmware upgrade for router-based AP management. So the router can manage access points. They need to be hardwired to your switch, and then we can do a lot of maintenance there. There's also the wireless app that can help with that. And so that's a kind of semi-solution for the mesh setup. We've got Vigo Connect. This is a free on-site management platform where firmware upgrades obviously are available. We can actually schedule that there as well. And the license Vigo ACS, that's a paid version, but it can be used in the cloud, and we can manage our networks from anywhere really in the world. So yeah, that's a great slide there as well. Thank you, Fergal. There's another question about the compatibility. So is the DrayTek Mesh compatible with third-party devices?
No, unfortunately not. It's just the way it works. Like I was mentioning earlier in the, like here where the router is the mesh route, you know, it has different chipsets to work together. So it's DrayTek Mesh technology feature, and it doesn't work with third-party products, unfortunately.
Okay, so there was yet another similar question about the meshing technology becoming like standardized from some, and there's a protocol that not many people may have noticed, supported by AP962C and 1062C. It's called Easy Mesh, and that's available on DrayTek access points, the latest access points. I haven't seen, or maybe I'm not aware of, many third-party vendors that also support it. But if it's required, then that probably can be an option to consider. So if you guys have a question or an issue with that, then please contact our support. We'll see if what's happening there. But it's available. Something that DrayTek is always open to cooperate with any other product. There's one more question here about the if cabling or cost wasn't a problem, what's the advantage of mesh over a router and AP configuration? So I think it's about the router-based central AP management feature versus mesh.
I suppose, like I mentioned, sometimes it's better to use the central management if you want to have, if you want to have, like, you know, 20 nodes or 50 nodes on your network, because you have the kind of limitations with mesh.
Yes, there are 8 devices for mesh per group, so
yeah,
we would have to configure multiple groups.
Yeah, well, there would be that. Yeah, so there'd be more kind of configurations that way. Yeah.
It's another question. Can mesh nodes and routes be managed by DrayTek Vigo ACS?
That's a good question. Do you want to take that, Lucas?
I think that option is available now. We can double check that, and we'll get back to the person directly as well who was asking the question. Another question here is, how do we compare DrayTek AP with Ubiquiti access points?
I haven't used Ubiquiti, so I wouldn't know really, but
right. Okay. I'm a big fan of DrayTek. That's why I'm with DrayTek, and I probably would stick with DrayTek because the way the management options are much greater. In terms of quality, I think they can compare easily with each other. The fact I know about DrayTek products is that the failure from the repair center is like, if we do receive any products, it's very low percentage, very, very low, less than 1%. And out of that, many products are actually in a workable state. They probably just need to be rebooted or something. Yeah, I find DrayTek a great product, and I'm a big fan of the devices we've got here. So if there are no further questions, or you would like to ask some additional questions, please do so in the question section. We're still gonna stay with you for a couple of more minutes, or I think we can actually end the webinar soon, Fergal.
Yep. So in conclusion here, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Lukasz for their invaluable assistance today. I also want to express my gratitude to all of you for taking part in the webinar. I hope you found the information presented to be insightful and beneficial. Thank you very much.